The sky above the arena was dark and filled with thick smoke. Bright lights circled the huge battlefield where one human stood alone. His name was John Carter, and his hands were chained, but his eyes were steadied. Around him thousands of strange alien creatures sat in silence, watching him from every corner of the great stadium. Some of them had claws, some had glowing eyes, and others looked like shadows with no face. At the center of the arena on a high platform stood a tall alien dressed in black armor with golden spikes across his shoulders. He was the warlord of Zintha, ruler of 3-star systems, feared across the galaxy for feeding his enemies to his monstrous pet. The warlord raised one hand, and his voice echoed like thunder. Why aren't you trembling, human? Do you not understand where you are? One word from me and my pet will devour you. From behind the warlord, a giant metal door opened with a loud growl. Chains clanked, and a beast larger than a transport truck stepped forward with glowing red eyes and a mouth full of teeth as long as swords. The crowd roared in excitement, shaking the walls of the arena. The beast was called Vorak, and it had crushed many warriors before, but John stood still. His face had no fear. His eyes never blinked. The warlord laughed again. You are either very brave or very stupid, human. Let me show you the last thing you will ever see. He snapped his fingers. The chains broke. A Vorak charged. Ground shook under its heavy legs. Dust rose around it like a storm, and the crowd screamed with joy. John did not move. His breathing was slow, his heart calm. He watched the beast come closer and closer, and then it stopped. Vorak stood just inches away from John, its breath hot like fire, its eyes staring deep into his soul. The arena fell silent. Everyone waited for blood, but Vorak did not attack. Instead, it sniffed the air, slowly stepped back, and then lowered its giant head to the ground in front of John. Like a wild animal showing respect, the warlord screamed in anger. Impossible, this cannot be. The crowd was confused. Some stood, some showed. John finally spoke, his voice calm and clear. Your pet remembers. The warlord growled. What are you talking about? Human. John's eyes looked at the beast, then back at the warlord. You think humans are weak, but you don't know what we've done, what we've survived. Your pet knows its ancestors met us before in a war. Your history books try to erase. Your pet is not afraid of you, but it remembers the fear of you. Placed his hand gently on the beast's head, and the great creature let out a low growl. A growl not of anger but of warning. The warlord stepped back. Guards, get in there now. John looked up at the crowd. You all came here to see a human die, but now you will see something. Alcee turned to the beast and whispered one word. Run. Vorak roared so loud that the walls cracked and then leaped towards the stands, crushing the first line of guards with one swipe of its paw. The arena exploded into chaos. Aliens screamed and ran in every direction as the beast broke barriers and towers. John picked up a fallen guard's weapon and moved quickly through the smoke. He didn't run away. He was moving toward the warlord. The warlord tried to escape through a hidden door, but John was faster. The beast tore through the upper level, chasing soldiers who dared to shoot at it. Above the noise, above the fear, one voice stayed strong in John's mind, the voice of his commander back on Earth. If captured, do not reveal. Fear is power. In alien minds, control it, and you control them. He remembered every word as he reached the steps below the warlord's platform. The warlord looked down, confused, angry, afraid. This is not possible. You are just a human. John raised the weapon. Yes, I am, but not the kind you expected. Then he climbed the steps slowly, step by step, while fire and chaos filled the arena behind him. The crowd no longer cheered. They watched in silence as a single human walked toward power, walked toward revenge, walked toward the truth they had all ignored. John stopped just in front of the warlord. The alien trembled slightly, his mouth dry, his pride broken. The human leaned close and whispered again. You asked why. I am not trembling. You should have asked why. You are the beast roared again, this time from the top of the arena as fire lit the sky. John raised his eyes toward the stars. He was not afraid. He never was. Long before the arena, before the beast, before the warlord, John Carter was just another name in a long list of Earth soldiers trained for the unknown. He had no special blood, no alien weapon, no superpowers. What he had was silence, the kind of silence that waits, listens, and then strikes when the time is right. When the sky turned black over Earth and ships began falling like steel rain, John was deep underground inside Project Black Dawn, command unit without uniforms or medals, where fear was studied like science and silence was turned into armor. Aliens came in fire, thinking Earth would break quickly. They attacked cities, burned forests, and turned oceans into boiling traps. They spoke in loud words and showed strange machines. They believed fear would win the war before the war even started, but they were wrong. The first human ship destroyed in space did not scream. It sent back one signal: we are not afraid, and then it went quiet. This confused the enemy. They had studied Earth language, Earth tech, Earth biology, but they had never studied the human mind, and they had never met people like John. In a chamber deep under the Rockies, John was tested every day. Rooms with no light, chairs with no walls, air with no sound. He faced creatures designed to break the brain, but he never cracked. He learned to listen, not to panic, to think, not to react. He was trained Not to fight fear, but to walk through it like fog. Then came the mission. One ship, one man, and one mission. Get captured, go behind enemy lines, learn everything, destroy from within. John said nothing when he was taken. He let them bind his arms and scan his thoughts. He allowed their tricks and stood still as their pain machines worked. Day and night they could not find weakness. They could not read his fear because it was not their end. Slowly the aliens began to fear him. Instead they called him the Quiet One. Some believed he was broken, some believed he was waiting. No one could agree, but all felt uneasy around him. Even the guards walked faster near his Sullivan. The warlord himself refused to look into his eyes for long. And now in the arena, that same man stood as the beast bowed on. The crowd that had once laughed now stared in silence. John moved through smoke like wind, holding the stolen alien weapon like he had used it for years. He was not rushing, he was not hiding, he was thinking. Each hallway was mapped in his mind, each door, each control point. He had studied it all during his time in the prison chamber. Even the language he knew, the alien word for open fire, for shield down, for override, and he used them now as guards shouted and failed to stop him. Back in the control chamber, the generals argued this cannot be just one human. One shouted that the beast was broken, another blamed the guards. A third whispered, what if he is something else? The warlord slammed his fist on the table and growled, silence, he is only flesh and bone. But inside his eyes, the warlord knew it was not true. He remembered the first time he saw John behind the force shield. The human had stared at him without blinking, not proud, not angry, just calm like a hunter watching prey. Now that look had returned. John moved through the corridors and placed small devices at key spots. Black dawn tech made of stolen parts and quiet fire, not to explode but to reveal, to show Earth what the enemy truly was and what it feared the most. As alarms echoed, John spoke into the stolen Kumu are not ready for a soup. Think we fear your pets and your fire and your machines, but we have walked through worse and survived. The message was sent in every direction, bouncing from satellite to ship to world. Aliens across systems heard the voice of one human, alone inside their strongest fortress, and they listened because something in that voice made their hands shake. Not because it was loud, but because it was calm. John reached the highest tower and looked down at the arena now burning. The beast roared again, not for blood but for freedom, the same freedom John carried in his silence. And then he saw the ship, a small scout vessel once used for patrol, now waiting at the top pad. He moved quickly, avoiding cameras, using blind zones. The guards near the ship did not see him until it was too late. One hit with the stolen blade and they dropped without sound. He entered the ship and powered the engines. The door began to close, but a voice echoed behind him, you will not escape. It was the warlord standing with his own weapon. John looked at him through the glass and tilted his head. Escape was never the mission. He pressed a button and the ship rose behind him. The arena burned, the control room burst with sparks, and the beast howled one last time as the walls filled and as stars filled the sky ahead. John whispered the words that started it, or they think I am alone, but they don't know what waits behind me. They don't know Earth. The fires of the arena still glowed like dying stars across the shattered battlefield as the smoke rose into the alien night sky, and the screams of panic slowly faded into echoes of silence far above the ruins. In the broken command tower, the warlord stood alone, blood on his armor, rage in his heart, and fear in his eyes as he stared at the trail of destruction left by a single human and a creature that was supposed to obey only him. He could not understand what had happened. He could not explain the beast's betrayal or the human's control, and the question burned inside him like poison. Why did the beast bow? Why did it not tear the human apart like all the others before? In the darkness of the forest beyond the arena, where the lights did not reach and the air was thick with the smell of ash and metal, the beast moved slowly through the trees. Its massive body cast long shadows on the ground. Its breath came heavy and deep, and its eyes glowed faint red like twin lanterns searching for something more than prey. John Carter walked beside it. No chains, no force, no tricksy. Walked as if they were partners, not man and monster, but something older, something deeper, and the beast followed him with a strange peace in its steps. There was no fear between them, only understanding. Deep in the beast's blood there were old memories, not of this war, not of this world, but of a time before stars had maps and before planets had names. At names, a time when its kind had landed on Earth in hunger and left in terror. They had thought the humans weak, soft, slow, but the humans had hunted them with fire and ice and traps that sang in the night. The old ones of its kind had told stories in growls and roars around black pools of lavesteries of the two-legged creatures who never stopped chasing, who never showed pain, who would lose a limb and still crawl forward with teeth. The beast had never seen Earth, but it carried those stories in its bones, and when it smelled John Carter for the first time in the arena, it knew the scent of legend. It knew the taste of danger, and it chose not to fight it, chose to following the trees. John stopped and looked at the creature. He raised one hand slowly, and the beast lowered its head again, just like it had. In the arena there was no command spoken, there was no magic word, there was only trust, and in that silent moment a strange bond formed, not of master and slave, not of soldier and weapon, but of equals. Back in the alien city, panic still ruled the night. Ran through streets, lights flashed in broken patterns, and the alien citizens hid behind stone doors, afraid of one man. The warlord called his advisors to the war chamber, but they did not answer. Most had fled, some had taken ships, others had locked themselves and vaults. He was alone, with his pride shattered and his empire on fire. He looked at the last screen still working. It showed a grainy image from the Forster man and a beast walking side by side into the unknown, and, for the first time in many years, the warlord felt something he had not felt since childhood: doubt in the forest. John reached a ridge and looked down at the alien village. A broken pipeline ran through it, and above it the sky was wide and full of stars. He knew others would come. The message he had sent was bouncing across the galaxy now. The voice of Earth was no longer silent. He turned to the beast and placed his hand on its rough skin. "We are not done." The beast gave a low growl in answer, not angry, not wild, just ready. From behind them came a sound in the trees, not loud but sharp. John turned, weapon in hand, eyes scanning the dark. The beast stepped forward, teeth bared. 3 figures moved from the shadows, not guards, not hunters. They were prisoners like Joan, a thin woman with silver skin, a short creature with 4 arms and eyes full of fire, and an old being wrapped in glowing cloth that moved like smoke. They looked at John not with fear but with hope. They had seen the arena, they had seen the impossible, and they had followed. "Are him," the woman said. The human John nodded once she stepped closer. Slowly, "Can we come with you?" He looked at the beast and then back at the stars. "Yes, but understand, this is not escape, this is war." They all nodded without question. The group moved together through the dark. Not an army, not yet, but something was growing, a force made not of ships or lasers or gold but of fear turned into fire, pain turned into purpose. John Carter walked at the front, his eyes fixed on the sky, and behind him the beast walked, not as a pet but as a shadow of ancient terror reborn. The galaxy had seen the human once, it would see him again. Next time he would not come alone. The warlord stood at the edge of the broken tower, his claws wrapped around the rail, his breath heavy with rage, his heart pounding with a fire he could not control. Below him, the arena was a graveyard of metal and smoke, a place that once held power, now reduced to silence and ruin. He watched the screens flicker and die one by one, each showing the same image: a man walking through the forest, a beast by his side, and shadows gathering around him. They were not soldiers, they were not trained, but they were moving with purpose. The said human had become a signal, and now that signal was spreading up. The city lights failed and systems glitched as silent explosions ripped through hidden control rooms left by the human during his escape. A warlord turned to his last guard, his armor still shining though his hands trembled. "Find him, bring me his head or bring me yours." The guard bowed and left without a word, his steps quick, his face pale. Far away in the lowlands, John Carter sat with a small group near a dying fire. The beast rested behind them like a mountain, breathing steady like thunder. In sleep they had moved all night, crossing old tunnels and empty fields, avoiding the main roads where scanners still searched. The stars above them shifted as patrol ships passed, but none stopped, none dared come close. John listened to the wind, his ears trained to catch movement, his hands never far from his blade. The woman with silver skin spoke first, her voice soft and unsure. Said, "This is not escape, this is war. Why do you fight?" John looked at the fire, its flames dancing in silence. Then he looked at the stars. "Because they need to know what happens when you corner the wrong species, because they think fear is power, because they forgot what humans are." She nodded and said nothing more. The old one in glowing cloth unrolled a map made of light and dust, showing the warlord's fortress, its towers sharp like knives, its gates locked by old tech and fear. "We can strike here in 2 nights when the moon's split and the shadows are longest." John studied the path, his fingers tracing the weak points, the blind spots, the energy grid. Then he looked at the beast, who opened one eye and growled low like thunder rolling through stone. It was time. The march began before the second sun rose. John led the way through broken roads and shattered walls, each step careful, each sound counted. More joined them along the way. Prisoners escaped from other pits, workers tired of pain, rebels who had lost everything except their will to stand there. It came with stones, with scrap metal, with nothing but rag, and still they came. By nightfall they stood before the outer ridge, looking down at the fortress that had once ruled stars. John raised one hand and all fell silent. He turned to the beast and nodded once. "Go." The beast moved like a ghost through the trees, vanishing into the dark. The guards at the outer gate laughed as they scanned the night. Then the gate exploded in fire and steel as the beast crashed through their ranks. Like a god of fury, screams filled the towers as panic spread faster than orders, and in that chaos the humans attacked. John moved like wind through the halls, his blade cutting through armor like cloth, his eyes locked on one goal. The warlord waited in his throne room, his last guards forming a circle around him, hands shaking. Weapons raised, then silence. One by one the lights failed, one by one the guards fell without sound, and then the door opened. John stepped through alone, his blade glowing faint, his face calmed. The warlord rose tall and proud, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. "You came alone." John shook his head slowly. "No, I came with every voice. You silenced every life. You crushed every world. You burned. They stand behind me now." The warlord roared and charged, claws swinging, voice filled with hate. John dodged and struck Fast, a cut to the leg, then the side, then the chest. The warlord stumbled, blood pouring, teeth clenched. You are just a man. John stepped closer, eyes locked, voice steady as, and that is enough. With one final move, he drove the blade deep into the warlord's chest and held it there. The warlord fell to his knees, breath fading, pride broken. John leaned close and whispered, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." The beast entered the hall behind him, silent but massive. The others followed, one by one, their faces marked with fire and hope. John turned to them and raised his hand. "Hide, the fortress is ours." The stars watched in silence as a new voice rose across the galaxy, not of kings or emperors, but of survivors and fighters and dreamers, and at the center of it stood one man, one beast, and one belief: fear does not rule forever. The stars above the ruined fortress blinked like eyes watching in silence as smoke curled into the night, and the echoes of battle faded into the wind. The beast stood on the highest tower, its head raised, its breath heavy as the cold wind carried the scent of fire and metal across the valley below it. John Carter walked through the shattered halls with quiet steps, his blade still wet with war, and his eyes locked on the horizon, beyond the mountains, beyond the stars, beyond the warlord. Fortress was no longer a prison, no longer a throne. It had become a message, a loud, silent scream that moved faster than ships and burned deeper than lasers across the galaxy. The message spread from planet to station, from moon to outpost, from listening posts to war rooms. A single human had brought down a warlord. He had not used armies or fleets. He had used silence and fire, and the truth no one wanted to hear. They called it impossible. They called it but the footage could not be erased. The recordings were already spreading across underground networks, across rebel signals, across neutral systems. The Council of Stars gathered in emergency session. 12 rulers, 12 systems, 12 voices raised in panic and confusion. One spoke first, a lizard creature draped in gold with eyes that blinked in every direction. "He cannot be human. No human has ever done this." Another slammed his fist on the table, his armor black with battle medals earned in wars against 5 worlds. "I fought humans. They were strong, but not like this. Not like him." A third leaned forward, her voice sharp and cold like ice under pressure. "Then perhaps this one is different. Perhaps this one is not only human. Perhaps this one is a warning." They watched the footage again, the silent march through fire, the beast following him, the warlord falling to his knees. They listened again to his words, the message that broke empires. "This is not the end. This is the beginning." And they realized something dark and simple. The human was not trying to escape. He was starting something on Earth, deep beneath the surface, in the command core of Project Black Dawn. The generals sat around a glowing map showing enemy movements and resistance signals across the stars. They watched the same footage, but their faces did not show fear. They showed preparation. The voice of Commander Reyes broke the silence, her hands folded, her tone sharp. "He has reached phase 2. He has activated the signal. He is doing exactly what we trained him for." Another nodded, his voice Kamalian. "Systems are destabilizing, networks are fracturing, loyalists are turning. Here has done more alone than any fleet could do in 10 years. Reyes looked at the map again, eyes narrowing at the growing red zone now blinking over the warlord's fallen fortress. "Now we prepare for contact. They will come here, and they will not come in peace back in the fortress." John stood with the new arrivals, survivors, rebels, and escaped slaves from across the system, each with their own pain, each with their own fire. They looked at him not as a king, not as a god, but as something rare, a human with no fear. He did not give speeches. He did not shout. He simply pointed to the stars and said, "They will come, and we will be ready." The beast walked among them, silent and calm, no longer a weapon of fear, but a protector, a legend, alive. The old one with glowing cloth came forward, holding a device that pulsed with alien light and energy. "This is a deep core relay stolen from the warlord's vault. It can speak across systems, across fleets, across time." John took it in his hands, felt its hum, and activated it. The message would be short, the words simple, but the weight behind them would shake the walls of power. He stood before the crowd, before the stars, before every listening ear in the galaxy's voice was steady, his eyes sharp. "I am John Carter of Earth. You came to take our world. You came to feed your pets and test your weapons and break our spirit. You failed. I do not speak for fear. I speak for those you hurt, for those you crushed, for those you never thought would stand again. We are standing now. Come if you must, but no. This Earth is not prey. Earth is not weak. Earth is waiting." He ended the message and handed the device to the old one, who bowed deeply without a word. The crowd stood in silence, not because they were afraid, but because they believed. Far above them, hidden in the black sky, a probe sent by the council hovered in secret, gathering every word, every image, every pulse. It turned and flew back through the stars toward the center of power, its data ready, its truth undeniable inside the council chambers. The rulers watched the live feed end, and none of them spoke for a long time. Then one asked the only question that mattered now: "What do we do with Earth?" Another answered with a whisper that trembled, "We either make peace or we prepare for war." The stars shifted slowly above Earth as satellites turned their eyes outward, listening for signals, watching for movement, and waiting for the moment everyone knew was coming in the deep black between worlds. The first ships began to gather, silent and cold, shaped like blades forged in the dark, filled with warriors trained from birth to erase resistance. They did not come to speak. They did not come to ask questions. They came to end a threat before it spread. They came for Earth on the far side of the moon, hidden beneath the ancient crater fields. A base older than any nation watched without blinking its walls. Buried its heart alive inside that base, the commanders of Earth's last defense stood around a map of the solar system lines. Blinking red, yellow, and white, each line a breath, each pulse a warning. Commander Reyes stood at the center, her eyes locked on the incoming fleet, her voice calm like stone under pressure. They are coming in 3 waves. First scouts, then destroyers, then carriers and siege. Ships full force, full intent, no message, no demand, just movement. The room was silent until General Holt stepped forward, his hands behind his back, his words simple. Then we activate war protocol. Earth. Reyes nodded once and turned to the nearest console, her fingers tapping a code, long sealed behind levels of clearance no one had touched since the stars first turned hostile across the planet. Systems awakened, shields long buried hummed with new life. Energy flowed through old veins, and weapons born from silence opened their eyes for the first time. The skies above cities flickered as drones rose in formation, each armed with plasma, each linked to a human mind ready to defend, not for power, not for empire, but for plunder. Oceans, black submarines, shifted position. Ancient giants of steel moved without sound, their eyes on the deep gates where danger might come from. Below and high in the orbit hidden behind the curve of Earth, a station came alive, its name whispered only in secret, its purpose known to few. The Leviathan, a weapon not of destruction but of denial, a final answer to any force that dared forget what Earth truly was. Meanwhile, deep in the forests of the alien world where the fortress had fallen, John Carter stood on a cliff, his eyes watching the distant sky, his hand resting on the beast beside him. He knew they were coming. He had always known. He had not sent the message to scare them, he had sent it to prepare. Earth behind him, the rebel camp moved with speed and order. Warriors sharpening blades, engineers reprogramming old tech, scouts sending signals across rebel channels. They were not soldiers, but they were ready. The old one with glowing cloth approached, holding a device pulsing with coded light. They have launched full strength, headed straight for your home. John looked at the stars, then turned toward a transport hidden among the rocks, its frame patched, its engine loud. He placed one hand on the beast, then spoke without turning. Stay with them, protect them if I do not return them. Beasts growled low, a sound not of anger but of warning, as if to say, return or be hunted. John entered the ship, and it lifted with a burst of fire rising fast through clouds and ash, breaking through the edge of space into the cold black where only truth could survive. Back on Earth, the people did not panic, they did not scream, they moved with purpose. Schools closed, not in fear but in preparation. Factories turned to production labs, focused on defense. Medical centers, stocked with resolve not just supply. Civilians volunteered, knowing what was coming and what was at stake, not because someone told them to, but because they were human, and humanity had a memory. They remembered every time they had been underestimated, every time they had been counted out, every time someone thought the fight was over before it began. This time they would write the story themselves. The alien fleet reached the outer edge of the solar system, sensors sweeping data, flowing, weapons charged, ready. But Earth was not silent. The signal reached them, not a voice, not a threat, a frequency, low and steady, a hum that carried only one message: we are awakened. Board the flagship of the enemy fleet. The admiral stood before the main screen, his many eyes locked on Earth, his hands folded behind him, his breath slow. He had fought 100 wars, crushed 100 rebellions, broken 1,000 defenses, but this felt different. He watched the shape of Earth grow larger, watched the systems light up, not with panic but with precision, and something deep inside him began to stir out. He turned to his officers, gave the order to prepare full assault, but his voice lacked the sharp edge of certainty as Earth rotated slowly before them, its lights blinking not in fear but in rhythm. A new alert sounded across the fleet, an incoming ship, fast, small, alone inside that ship. John Carter watched the enemy grow on his screen, his face calm, his hand steady, his purpose clear. He opened a channel, not to beg, not to warn, but to speak. You came early, I was hoping for more time. Now we start on my terms. Ended, and the small ship vanished from their scanners, gone like a shadow in the wind. And Earth, come on. The stars above Earth burned brighter than ever, as if they too had chosen a side, as if they too were watching what was about to unfold in the cold silence of space. The alien fleet moved with perfect order, a wave of power shaped to conquer. Their ships like daggers, their weapons like fire from forgotten gods, their confidence unshaken by the warnings. They believed they had seen everything. They had seen war, they had seen resistance, they had seen death, but they had never seen Earth fight without fear. In the dark side of the planet, the Leviathan waited, its core spinning, its arms unfolding like wings of steel, its voice silent but known across every human command station. Inside the command room, Commander Reyes stood with hands clasped behind her back, her eyes locked on the screen, her heartbeat matching the rhythm of the war alarms. A voice came through, calm and steady: the human ship has vanished from sensors. Repeat, we have lost contact with Operative Carter. Reyes did not flinch. She turned to the operator and answered without doubt, he is where he needs to be. Begin Leviathan cycle. Too high. Above, the enemy fleet sensors screamed warnings. Too late to help them. From the blackness came a shadow, not a ship, not a missile, but something old and powerful, something born in the darkest depths of Earth's forgotten labs. Leviathan moved it, did not fire it, did not roar it, simply bent space around itself and reached for the lead alien cruiser, pulling it into silence before it could even screamed. The rest of the fleet scattered in panic. Their perfect order shattered, their voices loud with fear. Admirals barked orders, ships spun into defensive formation, but the silence that followed was louder than any command, and in that silence came a voice. John Carter stood inside the heart of the enemy flagship, quiet and unchained, his blade dripping with memory, his eyes filled with purpose. He had entered through the cracks, through the blind spots, through the fear they could not see. Guards that once laughed at him now lay silent on the floor, their weapons cold, their pride broken. He walked through the smoke like a storm, without sound, without mercy, without pause. The high commander of the fleet waited on the bridge, his claws ready, his armor burning with energy. "You should have stayed on your planet, human." John raised his blade and spoke with a voice that carried across stars. "You should have stayed away." They charged, their weapons clashing, their minds locked in the last argument of war, not with words, but with will, not with numbers, but with truth. The crew tried to escape, tried to hide, but none could leave, none could look away. For in that battle they saw something they had never seen before. Not rage, not madness, not chaos. They saw a man who did not need to win, who only needed to be heard, and that was more dangerous than any weapons. The commander fell to his knees, breath gone, armor cracked, eyes wide with something like understanding. John whispered the words he had carried since the arena. "This is why you should fear us, not because we destroy, but because we endure it." Turned to the control panel and entered the final code, the one buried deep in the files of Black Dawn, the one that would link Earth's defense with the heart of the alien fleet back on Earth. The lights of every satellite blinked in perfect synchronous, gave the last order release signal, full spectrum, and across the galaxy the message flew, a human voice, not screaming, not shouting, but calm and clear to all who hear this. "We are Earth. You tried to break us. You tried to erase us. You tried to make us fear, but fear is no longer yours to command now. Hear our truth. We do not kneel. We do not run. We do not forget. We are not your prey. We are the storm you made, and we are coming on every planet once loyal to the fallen warlords." People listened in silence. Some cheered, some wept, some simply turned their eyes to the stars and waited. The galaxy would never be the same back in the rebel camp. The beast lifted its head and roared once, not in pain, not in hunger, but in pride. The survivors stood together, watching the sky light up with streaks of fire and hope. John Carter stepped out of the enemy ship as it crashed quietly into the forest. Landing like a final breath of war, he walked forward into the light, into the crowd, into the future. The silver-skinned woman smiled and said, "We thought you were lost." John looked to the stars and answered, "I was found." The old one bowed deeply and whispered the word that now echoed across planets, across systems, across history. "He may not," as a curse, not as a threat, but as a warning. A name that now meant something more than species, more than blood, more than planet. It meant fire that walks and never dies, meant silence that breaks empires. It meant Earth